There's such a huge population demographic advantage that India has right now. That's one of the superpowers of India. Last night we were with the Prime Minister and the roundtable of CEOs. It was just very encouraging to see everyone wanting to work together to make sure that we can further the cause.
Today, I'm delighted to have with us Jeetu Patel. Jeetu, president at Cisco and chief product officer, has been here at the summit and is one of the global thinkers.
While I was an undergrad, I didn't have enough money to actually pay for school. And so I was afraid that I'm going to get deported because I don't have enough money for tuition.
With Indian CEOs and executives running so many firms in the US, the discourse becomes that look how well Indians are doing. But I think the stories of struggle, rejection, and darker sort of moments never gets highlighted.
Modern software development has completely flipped now to being fully automated.
There's a lot of talk now of how in the expect a world where agents are going to be our colleagues.
All of us are going to be managers of agents.
But here in India and many other parts of the world, it's going to be possibly very disruptive.
Some jobs will categorically get lost. Every job will get reconfigured. But there'll be entirely new industries that get created for the jobs that don't exist right now. When it comes to coding, I'm very sympathetic to the fear that people have saying, okay, so what am I going to do as an engineer if I don't code? We have now got 100% of one product that we have in our portfolio that is coded fully by AI. No human code written. However, that doesn't mean that we don't need human engineers in there. Where I think this could go wrong is if you get intellectually lazy and don't have deep thinking. There's a possibility that you could actually find tremendous amount of intellectual rigor that comes out of this.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the AI Futures podcast series, where we're bringing you some of the best and leading thinkers, actors, leaders from the world of AI. And today I'm delighted to have with us, as part of that series, Jeetu Patel. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me on the show, Anirudh.
Now I'm excited to have you here with us. Tell us a little bit about your own personal journey. What took you from Bombay off to the States and how your different roles have evolved?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was I was in Bombay for the first 19 years of my life, and then decided that, I had not a great relationship with my dad. He was kind of abusive to my mom. He tended to be, he was kind of in the wrong, shady kind of businesses. So I didn't want to actually associate with him that much. So at some point, I'm like, the best way for me is to get out, get away from him.
Correct.
And so I left to go to get my undergrad done. In fact, I ran away from home. I took my mother and put her in an undisclosed location because he was pretty abusive to her. And then I just took a flight that night at 4 a.m. and went to
amazing. So this is like you were like 17, 18 at the time.
I was 18 at the time. 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And 19 actually. And then as soon as I went to my uncle's home in the U.S. He lived in Chicago, and then it was an interesting story because I went there. I went to undergrad, and then while I was an undergrad, I had this angel of a professor because I didn't have enough money to actually pay for school, and so I was like afraid that I'm going to get deported because I don't have enough money for tuition. And this angel of a professor gave me an assistantship. In the U.S. as an undergrad for undergrads, which never happens. It was just a stroke of luck. It wasn't like I was a genius.
And that's typically PhD students who
get that
kind of
right?
role. Correct.
But she was just like, she took a liking to me and she kind of helped me out. And so that allowed me to get through school.
Yeah.
And while I was there, she then introduced me to these guys who were starting out a market research firm. And so they said, you might want to go intern there. So I went and interned there. And then while I was interning, they offered me a job when I graduated, and but they said like, hey, look, we're going to be buying out the company from this original investor. I'm like, oh, and so I'm like, I want in, and I was making like $4 an hour at the time. They didn't have enough money, and they said, well, put in $250,000 and you're in. And so there was this. Banker who used to be there that was also our customer, and he was always a mentor to me over there. And so I went to him. I'm like, can I borrow $250,000? And the guy goes, why do you need $250,000? I'm like, I'm going to buy this company. He's like, what are you going to do when you buy it? I'm like, I'm going to run it. And you're young and dumb. You kind of don't know what the risk profiles are, and
that's the only time you can do this.
That's the only time you can do this. Actually, is what I learned later. You get too analytical as you get older.
You get too risk averse later.
And so he said to me, "Okay, son, come by tomorrow, pick it up." And he gave me a loan at 10% interest. It was a hefty interest rate.
Yeah, for the US, that's high.
But he gave me the break, and so we bought the company. I ran that business for 17 years, and it was like one of those things where, my mother came over after like 7 years of me not seeing her, and then she lived there, and she went back and forth, and then I got this itch for scale. I'm like, I need to go and learn scale, because this was a small business, and you'd work hard, but didn't really feel like you're gonna go change the world. And I'm like, I want to understand impact, because the thing that fascinated me about America was the consistency across the entire country at scale and how businesses ran. And so I decided to go to a very large company from a very small company. So sub 20 people to 60,000 people.
My God.
And, the guy who was actually interviewing me was an ex-Microsoft guy. His name is Rick Devenuti. He's still my coach to this day. And he was my first boss that I went through over there. And so he basically was having dinner with me, and I'm like, his name is Rick Devenuti. And I said, Rick, you got to pay me more. Like, I've got so much experience. I've got 17 years of experience. You got to pay me more. And he looked at me, and it completely, no expression on his face, said, Jeetu, you don't have 17 years of experience. You have 1 year of experience 17 times over. And come work for me, and I'll give you 17 years of experience in 1 year. And it was actually absolutely true. Like, I learned more from him in the first year than I did running my own business for 17 years, because he was operationally so astute. And so I did that. Then then there was like one thing led to the other, and I'd moved to Silicon Valley from Chicago, and then things started compounding. I worked for Box. We took that business from 200 million to about 800 million, and then I was going to go join a FANG company to run advertising, and then Chuck Robbins, our CEO, called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come work here?" I'm like, "I've already accepted this job. I'm going to be going there." He's like, "Just come and talk to us." Good. And then
that's how it starts.
It started that. I was 9 days away from starting at that other company, and the one thing led to the other, and here I am at Cisco. Probably the best career move I've ever made. I'd say.
Yeah. Well, so far.
There's so more. Far, yeah. I hope this is my last job, though. Like, I don't want to keep changing. Changing jobs for me is traumatic. It seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. No, there's a couple of threads I want to pick up here from what you've described, because, in the whole mainstream discourse with Indian CEOs and executives running so many firms in the US, the discourse becomes that look how well Indians are doing. But I think the stories of struggle, the stories of probably a lot of like dejection and rejection and darker sort of moments never gets highlighted. So I'm glad that you've shared some of that personal journey with us. And I want to pick up on two of those threads. One is the role of mentors and teachers, which you pointed to. And the other, of course, is how to make some of these shifts seamlessly, like which you've done. So let's start off with the teachers and mentors. And I'll tell you why I picked up on that amongst the various things you were describing, because I think even for me, as I've gone from, let's say, Delhi to Singapore, as we were discussing, Delhi to Singapore to the US, you're moving geographies. Often you are leaving family behind, as you did.
Was that hard for you as you went from one country to the other? And
see, I think looking back, it's when you're young, it's much easier.
Yeah.
You're moving and it's exciting, and it's a time of discovery, and you're coming to a new place and realizing that, this place is also exciting and interesting in many ways. So you make those moves. But I think it's only later, when maybe your brain cells become slightly wiser, that you realize that there were some things that you also lost along the way.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But in all of that discomfort of moving, or some people manage it very seamlessly, I think for me it was not that hard, to be honest. But the role of people who might not be your parents or your best friends becomes really important. I've had, like, even at the college I was mentioning at Haverford, one of my professors played a very similar role as what you were describing, where she said, listen, like you, I'm going to help you figure out your
Yeah.
path. I can see that sometimes you have this habit of deflecting to this thing or that thing.
Yeah.
But I can sense where you are going to be really good at, and let me help you push in that direction.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's what I wanted to ask you about. Like, other than that teacher, of course, and then you've mentioned Rick and other mentors along the way. Have they found you? Have you found them?
I tend to be excessively annoying to people that I find I can learn from, and just, force them into mentoring me.
Yeah.
Because I found that to be one of the best ways to not get too self-absorbed in drinking your own Kool-Aid, is get people that actually care about your well-being, that will tell you the truth.
Correct. And can sort of see you from the outside, right? I mean,
See you from the outside.
but know you well enough that they'll have your best interest.
Have the best interest at heart, but will be brutally honest with you about things. People love helping other people out, and so I think if you make sure that you take that advice in good stead and do things with it which are not just very transactional in nature. Like, what I hate when people come to me and say, I need a mentor, and you come there and the first 15 minutes they'll ask you for something.
Yeah.
Like, can I have a job now in your place? It's like, no, that's not the point of this. The point is to actually impart learnings. And so I think I've been very fortunate to have a handful of mentors that actually have shaped my career, and I would be nowhere without them. It warms
the
your
same
heart.
kind of warming sort of feeling where I think especially for teachers and professors, I think hearing about where their students have moved to or how their journeys are panning out, I think for them it's especially
It's
satisfying
very rewarding
for them.
Yeah, and I went to GD Somani in Bombay, and one of my professors, he's a Hindi professor, and his son is now in touch with me. And I reached out to him one time, and he almost started crying because he was so happy for the success that I've been lucky to enjoy, and it's just a great.
No, I think it is.
It's very rewarding to just. It feels very fulfilling.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring this out, because I think for many students who might be watching or many young professionals who might be watching, it's very important to remember that there's a whole journey that takes you there and a whole set of people along the way.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll give you one story which was actually very seminal on this one. Is she passed away like 3 years ago, and the last 8 weeks, she had become almost like my child for the past decade and a half.
They say that
the full circle comes
because
around.
you're the child and they're.
But in the last 8 weeks, we kind of knew that she was not going to make it.
Yeah.
And she flipped again, and she became a parent. And I was living with her in the hospital, and I still remember I was going to go to Amsterdam for I had to do a keynote or something at one of the Cisco events. And I'm like, Mom, I'm going to go for a day. I'll come back. And she just nodded her. She said, no, you're not going to go anywhere. I'm like, why is that? And she goes, because I don't want you to have regret of something happening to me while you're gone.
While you're gone for that one day.
And I don't want to leave after all these years having you feeling a sense of guilt. So I'm going to give you, over the course of the next few weeks, all the closure that you need so that you're going to be okay once I'm gone.
Yeah. Especially the massive role it seems like she has played in your life.
A huge role.
From those early days where that's driven you so much. So I think it's very fortunate that you got that time.
I was so lucky to have
with her at that stage. Yeah.
And by the way, she said, I want to die in your arms. She died in my arms. It was absolutely fantastic. We actually stayed for 8 weeks together, and I think those moments, when you're younger, I think the kids that are watching your podcast right now, I think it's hard because of the pressure and social media and what's happening with AI, and you have to learn, and you feel like it's overwhelming, and just get your core values right of being with the right people and having them coach and mentor you, and the rest usually tends to work itself out as long as you have an outsized kind of curiosity for learning.
Yeah, and be centered. I think that, as you're rightly saying, at the end of the day, those 8 weeks today will matter much more to you and will keep you grounded for the rest of your life than maybe another keynote that you would have delivered or another set of people you might have connected with, etc. So I think those values really need to stay strong, I think, which it seems in your case.
I was lucky that I was actually going to make the wrong call, and she insisted that I don't.
I was going to say that I expected her to say the reverse, because I think most Indian parents of that generation are very sacrificial, right?
Yes.
They'll say, no, don't worry about me.
Yeah.
You go do your thing, so you'll succeed in whatever
right,
you're doing.
that's right.
And so I was expecting your mom to have said the reverse. So I'm glad that she held you there.
She held me there,
Yeah.
and she kind of, we called every single person that had touched our lives, and we said goodbye, and it was magical.
Yeah, yeah. No, lovely. It almost seems pointless now to move to the world of
AI.
of tech and AI. But given we are the AI summit and we're doing the AI futures conversation, Jeetu, let me and we can keep coming back to some of the, I think, personal lessons that maybe shape your professional career and outlook also. So I don't mean to make a complete break from this.
No, that's totally fine.
But let's now move to the world of AI and the cyber piece and the security piece that you have now been inhabiting. We are at the India AI Summit. It seems like there's a movement here that could either build momentum with the summit, where the global south and countries like India could try and forge a different kind of vision maybe for AI. But I want to start off with your perspective on the global AI landscape today. Right now, you understand India. You've grown up here. You're spending a lot of time here professionally as well. How's the global AI landscape according to you? Is it as, let's say, bipolar in its US-China as the two poles view of the world? Or is there a broader set of actors that practically and realistically you feel will emerge? Or will it largely remain the two key actors that are currently shaping the world of AI? And what other aspects maybe of the global AI landscape you could highlight for us?
I think there's a bipolar dimension in a different way than what you were talking about that I've seen. There's a part of AI which is, and the Prime Minister very eloquently said that in his address yesterday, that there's one aspect which is driven by what he called bhai, fear.
Okay.
The other one which is driven by bhavishya, or what the future would look like. And the bhai side of things, I think there's a group of people in the world that think that this could be extremely damaging to society, and then there's other group of people that think that there's tremendous amount of upside. And I actually
so the AI optimists and the AI pessimists.
AI optimists and pessimists, and I actually feel like the balanced view is having an extreme level of optimism and hope without losing sight of what the downsides could be.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And I think if we do this right, I think humanity lifts quite a bit. And I actually feel like this event, India should congratulate itself, because you set the stage for AI being something that has to happen at machine scale and machine speed, but with a degree of emphasis on human centricity.
Correct.
And I feel like that's an area that India could play a pretty meaningful part. I mean, look, India is going to be one of the largest consumers of AI technology of any other country in the world because of just the sheer amount of population. You have 1.4 billion people, and there seems to be a fair amount of ingestion rate of these technologies that's happening. So from that perspective, I feel like there's a tremendous opportunity for it not just being two countries in the world, but more countries that can participate in different ways, by the way.
Okay.
The overly simplistic narrative becomes, okay, so you're going to build your foundation models. Like, you don't have to.
That's right.
Like,
there's many games to be played.
There's many games to be played here, and you have to make sure that you build on top of what someone else has built.
Absolutely.
I always give people the example, like if you think about Amazon, imagine if Amazon.com or Flipkart or whatever you pick your company of choice was built in the 1800s. It would be a massive failure because you didn't have
any of the supporting infrastructure
needed to go out and build it on top of. So I think the way that we have to think about AI is build on top of the progress that's already made, rather than thinking of replicating the progress that someone else has made.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I think that we get, and I was mentioning to you that I look at a lot of the developments in AI from a geopolitical lens as well. And I think more often than not, countries are looking at this as they only get focused when the mainstream starts talking about chips and the shortage of chips, then everyone just puts all their efforts behind somehow procuring a few chips.
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly it becomes foundational models, and then everyone's like, I'm going to build, right? Whereas I think and one of the things I mentioned in my book also, which I was referring to the Great Tech Game, was actually with tech, you cannot be catching the tails of waves.
You can't. You have to lead the wave.
You will not actually make any wealth out of it. You might get to partake in it in some shape or form, but you'll not get to really create wealth or real value out of it if you're just catching tails of waves or tails of things that are already done, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And it's really important to actually have a view on the future of the Bhavishya piece, which is, okay, what are early waves that will arise because of these waves? And now let me try and catch that one. So a surfer friend of mine actually made a very similar analogy, and they said, we have to pick. One of the key things is I have to pick which wave I'm going to ride.
That's right.
I can't ride the same wave as the next surfer. I have to pick.
Yeah, and by the way, it doesn't give you the advantage. And you have to create a level of asymmetry, in the market where if the market's going a certain way, you have to add value in a different angle so that it then provides a very clear insertion point for you to come in. Like, for example, if you look at what's happening with India right now, there's, the progress that's being made around language models.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the number of dialects and the number of languages, and then also the notion of most people in India don't speak English or Hindi, they speak English. And that might be a very different set of model training kind of things that need to be done. It's its own language. And so I feel like those are the kind of things that can be of meaningfully additive when India participates. And I think they're doing that. So I'm very impressed with, this, what the Prime Minister has laid out as his vision. I think what the private sector is doing, what, ministers like Ashwini Vaishnav and others have actually done to really propel this thing. It's very encouraging to see.
Yeah, and I think on that multilingual piece also, I think, Sarvam launched their model here. For them also multilingual pieces now. And I think at some point there has to be if I see that multilingual foundational model focus that Sarvam and companies like that are bringing, and on the other side, this emphasis on healthcare and education and the humanity piece that India has, I think, prioritized. It's important that the two connect at some point to provide, as I see, personalized education, right, and personalized healthcare.
Exactly.
Because I think one of the key problems we have in India that we haven't solved fully yet is the fact that yes, not the best education to every Indian yet, right?
Yeah.
Even if they're getting education, I'm saying not the best education that they could possibly get. And you've studied, across the world, so I think you'll know what I mean. And then there's a lot of rote learning often, for example, that we get stuck with here. And the same way on healthcare. And I think that can unlock the capacity of Indians to really partake in the wave also.
Yeah.
In addition to, of course, creating great companies maybe in that space that can then go possibly global or at least around the world to some extent.
Yeah, and there's such a huge population demographic advantage that India has right now.
Yeah.
Especially given what's happening around the world with aging populations. Like that's one of the superpowers of India.
Yeah, that's right.
The number of people below 30 that are in the workforce that are going to have a STEM background.
So Jeetu, as we look at, we've, of course, the summit has helped us look at a lot at what India can do. And of course, it's the India AI Impact Summit, looking at how AI is shaping up around the world. But I know that you also have recently hosted an AI summit at Cisco.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you more about that because I think one of the key things for any country has to be that you understand what you can do well in the context of what's happening maybe at the cutting edge globally.
That's right.
Right, so that you are, as you were rightly saying, building on top of what's already happening and not just maybe building off in a silo. So help us understand, tell us about the summit, how that went. You pulled it off as a company here. Of course, it's been a whole of government, whole of country effort to pull off the India AI Impact Summit. Tell us about the Cisco AI Summit and maybe share with us some of the key takeaways, some of the key things that maybe got talked about there.
Yeah.
That maybe have not been the primary focus here.
Sure. And let me actually start by just congratulating the Indian government and specifically Minister Vaishnav, as well as Prime Minister Modi on the caliber of and scale of this summit. Like, I don't think anyone has seen 250,000 people in an AI summit yet.
Yeah.
And so that level of scale was just mind-boggling. Right?
And I think what I've loved also, I'll second that for a second, with the point that I think even for the top AI tech executives from around the world, I think it's a real sort of rubber hits the road type moment.
Absolutely.
I hope that when you see the masses of people that are interested in AI products, AI solutions, for them to visually see that ultimately actually this is the group of people we have to build this for. And not sort of be living in our own, let's say, Silicon Valley lab silo mentality.
It's a phenomenal coalition. And last night we were with the Prime Minister, and there was a round table of 28 or so CEOs. And it was just very encouraging to see everyone wanting to work together to make sure that we can further the cause. And I think the level of strategic direction that the Prime Minister was kind of laying out was heartwarming to see. So I feel very proud as a person with Indian origin to see how far we've come. On the AI summit that we did back in San Francisco, we did that on February 3rd. The goal was to make sure that we can have some of the tough conversations and not have it be just a product pitch. And so what we did is we opened up with Sam Altman, and then there was Mark Andreessen, and there was Fei-Fei Li, and a bunch of senior executives from Google, and Amin Vadat, and Kevin Scott from Microsoft, and on. And then we ended with Jensen. And the purpose of that was largely to say, can you cover the full stack from silicon all the way to the agent and the application? And what are the things that need to happen in each layer of the stack so that we can see progress being made, and that and the constraints and impediments can be overcome? Because right now, if you think about it, while there's a lot of possibility for AI, there's also a lot of kind of constraint in areas like infrastructure. We don't have enough power, we don't have enough compute, we don't have enough network bandwidth or memory capacity in the world to satiate the needs of AI. I think there's a trust deficit that's a pretty profound one, where people don't trust these systems, they're not going to use them. And the third one then is around this notion of a context gap or a data gap, where if you think about you and me, and how many tokens, trillions of tokens of context we absorb every day, so that it shapes our thinking. In the absence of that absorption of that context, we would not be as effective at what we're doing.
No, that's right.
An agent is going to be the same way. You have to make sure that you feed it context. And if you don't feed it context, it's not going to do well. But you have to create the apparatus to feed it context in the right way. So big learnings from that event were, I would say, 3 big learnings that came out for me. First one is there's a capabilities overhang. The innovation line is almost a vertical line at this point. The exponential is a vertical line. And part of the reason for that is modern software development has completely flipped now to being fully automated. And as a result, it's only going to compound in speed. So your capabilities are growing at a much faster rate than an organization's ability to absorb the change that's happening. That's my first learning. And we have to do a bunch of things to make sure that that gap gets bridged. The second learning, which goes through that, is we have this tremendous amount of emphasis on a human in the loop. Everyone talks about that, and I feel like the way we should be thinking about it is flip the model and make sure that AI is in every loop. Because if we can have AI in every loop, that will change the way that the process works, and that'll change the assumptions we have and how work gets done. And then the third big realization that's come out of that is it is less about these things being productivity tools, but as you move into the age of agents, these are teammates that are getting augmented to our workforce. And we have to think about accommodating those teammates. And just like it takes a human a vetting process, like if you were to go look for a job, like when I looked for a job at Cisco, what did they do with me? Well, the first thing they did was Chuck interviewed me. does this person have the right skills, the right temperament, the right value system to go out and actually do the job? Number two, after that was done, they didn't just take my word. They called some references.
Sure, of course. Massive background checks, some reference
Exactly.
checks.
Then there was a background check. Is he a criminal? Has he done something wrong? And then they give you a manager. Chuck was my manager and said, I'm going to give you some guardrails within which you can operate.
Yeah.
And I think agents have to get the same kind of things done. Like you're going to need to have a background check, and you're going to need to have some references, you're going to need to have some capabilities assessment. So a model eval is the equivalent of an interview.
Yeah.
AI supply chain is the equivalent of a background check. And we have to create that apparatus for AI to actually be ingested into work.
Yeah.
And so those are the three big learnings I had is, capabilities overhang, flip the model to AI in every loop, and make sure that you can think about these as not productivity tools, but as coworkers that are digital coworkers that are going to enter into the workforce, that are going to work for us, with us.
Yeah.
And you can delegate tasks. And the companies that will succeed are the ones that can safely delegate tasks and jobs to agents.
Yeah. For that agent, are we also thinking enough about how to shape their values?
Yes.
See, a lot of our conversation has been about, what's motivating you, what's driving you, our fears, your personal
Core
background,
values,
all of that, core values. And I think that's been a key question on values and ethics that people have been discussing around AI.
Yep.
How do you start to do that?
I think this is the central part of the success of AI is going to be.
And in a way that's still personalized, right? Because ultimately your values versus my values versus the next person's values are very different. Even if professionally we're being trained at the same things, at a Cisco or at a McKinsey or wherever, personally our values are different. But it seems that for AI agents, if we have to start to somehow infuse values, it's going to be hard to figure out what values, whose values.
Yeah, I think firstly, you can have it be free for all where all values are done on an individual basis, because your values might be, I want to go out and cause harm to humans, and not yours, but like a person's values. And that might not be the right set of values to allow to be infused into the agent, right? So the first thing is there have to be a core set of assumptions that the model has to be trained on, which is they are in service of humans, not in competition with humans.
Yeah, but that's like teaching a child that you have to listen to your
parent. Listen to your parents,
except the child will not.
No,
eventually.
But I think you can actually structure the way that these technologies evolve to create those guardrails and make sure that we continue to keep having that happen. And that's the thing that we have to make sure that we crack the code on figuring out. And by the way that you do that is not just by the training mechanism of the model, but by creating constant validation mechanisms around the model to say, is the model behaving the way that you want it to behave?
Yeah.
And when it's not, do you have a mechanism to provide runtime enforcement of guardrails? Because if you do it at design time, it's not going to work. You want to make sure that AI is going from being a compiled piece of code to being a code that's live all the time.
It's like living code now.
It's living code, right? And so you have to make sure that you actually create that runtime enforcement of guardrails. The way that policy and guardrails and values get instilled will be at runtime. They won't be always at design time.
Yeah.
And so you have to create an entire apparatus for trust in the system, because in the absence of you doing that, this thing could go sideways pretty fast.
Yeah. I think it can. One of the recent conversations I had, Jeetu, which is relevant here, is I was speaking to Joshua Bengio.
Yeah.
And we started talking about how the AI models are learning deception. Mm-hmm. Right? So much like humans deceive other humans, the models are starting to deceive humans. And so he was highlighting the fact that even at that runtime base level that
if you know you're just being tested for the evals,
so the models
just know how to go out and beat the eval.
They're being tested. Yeah. And when you're telling them to shut down, let's say a certain activity, they're shutting down in that moment, but then starting to, on a different machine,
create a parallel
run
structure.
Again, right? So that's why I brought that parent-child analogy here, because you think you're in control, you think that the child will listen to you because you created it, and you feel like you are, both the genetic DNA is coming from you, but also the the nature and the nurture and the nature piece coming from you, but eventually the child has a mind of his or of her own. And so, to what extent are you actually really worried that this might go out of our control, even if we have the most amount of guardrails?
I think there's a non-zero chance that happens, and so we have to, as a society, be extremely concerned about trust. Like it is one of the defining characteristics of how this will shape humanity moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep saying, like, you cannot be pessimistic about it, but you have to be realistic about the fact that there is a risk, and that risk has to get mitigated.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you could have a world of hurt and harm.
Yeah.
That can be caused.
The summit might move to Switzerland. At least there's some talk about that.
Yeah.
I was with the president of Switzerland.
Could we just stay for an extra week after Davos and just do it there?
Just do it there.
Less travel.
Though I think some people want the extra travel. Unlike you, maybe who's traveling too much.
Not me.
But it's important. It's interesting that you brought up the trust point, because we were discussing what the potential theme for the next summit could be, and the theme that came up last night. The president of Switzerland and some of the people who will now be organizing the next one from there, if it's going to Switzerland, was trust. So you said Switzerland as a trusted entity in our traditional banking and other domains. They want to bring trust to the center of the conversation. Also possible.
I'm a little biased because it is a large part of our business. We are building technology for protecting AI and keeping it safe and secure. But I can't think of a more important, kind of structural framework around which to make sure that you have discussions structured for the next year's AI Summit, because these things compound as well. The thing with AI is, you can't do this after the fact because the train might have left the station. So you have to make sure that you're doing it where you've created some guardrails as this thing is getting built up.
Yeah. Let's move to the other piece that I wanted to pick up from the takeaways you had from the Cisco Summit, which was of these agents and them as workers. There's a lot of talk now of, even at one of the panels I was at yesterday, at the summit the day before, the conversation was how in the future the workplace will be hybrid being humans and agents.
That's right.
So you have to expect a world where agents are going to be our colleagues and our teammates. Now, the conversation in the Valley at the Cisco Summit is, how do we integrate maybe these AI agents as colleagues into the workforce, etc.? That's one perspective, and that's one set of maybe problems or things to solve for. From an India perspective and a jobs perspective, one could view all of this as basically replacing people.
People's jobs.
Right? You've seen the talk of Indian IT services firms being under threat from, when Claude comes out, the stocks here drop. Right, it's a massive challenge, and given you understand both contexts, right? You understand the Silicon Valley context, you understand the massive population here that's getting employment through these IT services firms, all the engineers, our technical talent. That's for many of them the starting point. How do you start to reconcile these two? Because clearly the Valley wants to create efficiency, productivity through the agents. But here in India and many other parts of the world, it's going to be possibly very disruptive. So how do you start to reconcile the two?
I actually find the fear of job loss as a narrative to be much more prominent in the West than the East. Oddly enough, given the fact that...
Why is that, you think?
I think the media has actually taken a very active stance on what happens to the jobs that get lost. But let me give you my take on this. Because I've always found that you never fight a megatrend. You always use it as a tailwind.
Okay.
Because at some point in time, it's like what Victor Hugo says, you can't stop something whose time has come.
Okay.
And like you just have to go. And so my advice to people is, don't worry about AI taking a job, but really worry about someone using AI better than you taking a job. And if you end up not being dexterous in AI, the chances of you being relevant are going to be very small.
So I think that's a given, right? I think I agree with you that that's a given almost. If you're not going to ride the wave, you will be left behind. A lot of people are saying AI will not take the jobs of people, it'll take the jobs of people who don't use AI
Yeah.
and things like that. So while I agree with that, the point still remains, will the impact of jobs in, let's say, the medium term, maybe today it's being talked a lot more in the US, given the socioeconomic disparity AI is also causing in, by the way, even developed countries like the US. Do you think there'll be a way to reconcile here? Somewhere where there can be a reconciliation? Or are we inevitably moving to a situation where fewer humans needed for the same amount of tasks, and then maybe we just expand the number of tasks?
I think you'll reconfigure. Like in my mind, what will end up happening is some jobs will categorically get lost. Every job will get reconfigured. But there'll be entirely new industries that get created for the jobs that don't exist right now. That will end up happening. Now, where I'll just give you a very simple example in coding, because coding is the most concrete example we have right now, right? And I'll give you another one. The two use cases that currently work in AI at scale are learning and research and coding.
Yeah.
Learning and research, every consumer is doing it. You and I work on this every single day. We have to go out and do something. We'll go to ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever your choice of tool, Anthropic. That has not made me any less busy. Right? It has just allowed me to go out and increase and steepen my learning curve.
Okay. Agreed.
When it comes to coding, I'm very sympathetic to the fear that people have saying, okay, so what am I going to do as an engineer if I don't code? We have now got 100% of one product that we have in our portfolio that is coded fully by AI. No human code written. And it's actually a safety and security product. 100% written by AI. However, that doesn't mean that we don't need human engineers in there. That means that the process and the role that human engineer plays is completely different from what they used to play when they were writing classical code.
Yeah.
They now write specs in markdown files that become context input for the agent who then writes the code. And the bottleneck does not become the writing of the code, but the review of the code. Which, by the way, I also think will be algorithmically
I would think,
right?
correct. At some point, the review also will happen.
But the judgment on what kind of product to build that is in fact going to get market traction, I think is going to have human judgment element that'll be needed. And so there'll be more and more of that kind of work that'll get done. And so I think what ends up happening is the work shifts to something else.
Yeah.
During that time, there's disruption, there's pain, there's reskilling that needs to be done. And we are very focused on reskilling at Cisco and making that happen. But I do feel like, in general, as long as you have more ideas than you have capacity to prosecute them, I don't think it actually is a job loss scenario. I think it becomes something where it's a reconfiguration of the job that you do.
Yeah. And so if that ends up being correct, if what you're sort of projecting, right, then the other question that comes to my mind, especially for a country like India, but I think this applies to the US and others, is if you now look at, people tend to talk about tech talent as a whole, as one. But really, if you look at the different layers of tech talent that exist, from the engineers to the product managers to others, what you're saying is that almost the roles that you would do typically as an engineer much later in your career, they're going to get expedited. You'll have to start doing a lot of that design thinking work, the product management work, the pieces that typically you do, let's say, post a certain number of years in the profession. If that's the case, how does the talent workforce structure need to change? I'll give you an example from McKinsey, for example, a firm I have worked with, where we have teams that are basically a bunch of analysts, associates, then a project manager, an engagement manager, and then your partner, and then a director, client-facing. A lot of the conversation is that, much like the coding engineer, software engineer, the analyst in this role, you can take a law firm, same thing will apply. A lot of these entry-level jobs, they're getting automated or will be done by AI. And so you have to start doing, maybe to be relevant in that firm, the job that your engagement manager or your product manager and so now, but those people are already sitting up there. They're not going anywhere. So how does the structure of the workforce now need to change?
It's a really great question. And by the way, I have some very strong views on this one, because I think one of the stupidest things that a company can do is not hire early in career talent. because early in career talent is not just about having lower cost labor. It is about making sure that you have the younger people can come in and show us how to unlearn. Because one of the big liabilities of experience is the bias that you structure yourself with.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out a way that you actually combine the inexperience, the extreme inexperience with experience. And the experienced people benefit from the inexperience by knowing what to unlearn. And the inexperienced people benefit by the pattern recognition you get from the experience.
I mean, that's how society is working, right? I mean,
Yeah. I don't think that changes because of AI, right? I think that entry-level jobs might go away in the way that they're currently configured, but the pace with which a person can get to a certain level of base dexterity goes up exponentially. And so you actually almost level the playing field, where someone who comes in who is in their early 20s might be able to get an accelerated rate of learning compared to someone that's been around for a while. What I've found is the amount of full-time management jobs will start to diminish. People that are full-time managers that don't create and do work. I think it's going to be like all of us are going to be managers of agents, and you're not going to need people that just full-time manage other people.
But they'll manage people.
The middle
agents.
management is the area that you have to actually make sure that you start thinking about restructuring that. Everyone in some way, shape, or form. Like this is a piece of guidance I've given to my team. We don't need full-time managers. We need player coaches.
Yeah.
Right? If people don't get their hands dirty and get an instinct for how the work is done, it's very hard to motivate someone else to follow you.
Yeah.
And by the way, it'll be very hard to direct an agent if you don't fully understand how that's happening. And so like that entire field, the restructuring is going to be something that we as a society will have to try and experiment with. But every job is going to look different, and more importantly, the workflows are going to change quite dramatically.
Yeah.
And I think 26 will be the year where you'll start to see that actually start to happen.
Yeah. Let me now shift to a different aspect of this AI puzzle, Jeetu, that we've been discussing, which is if you look at how currently the models are going, the current AI infrastructure is going, it's getting bigger, right? The requirements...
And smaller as well, simultaneously.
Correct. So I want to actually bring out that duality, because one of the other arguments that people are making from a sustainability standpoint now, and I think that's an important constraint also that AI companies are running up against, the energy needs and then how that's impacting communities, local communities, because ultimately this is also energy going away from one to the other.
Yeah.
How do you see this panning out? I've heard now two different schools of thought around the world, as we've spoken to for this podcast, people from around the world, from Japan to the Middle East to the US to India. There's the bigger is better approach, which will require more and more energy because there's so much to be done.
Yeah.
There's so much potential AI has, so we've got to keep building.
Yeah.
500 billion, Stargate, bigger, trillions of dollars of investment, data centers, nuclear energy, all of that. Mm-hmm. On the other side, there seems to be a second school of thought that says, let's not make the same mistakes as we did at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, where we chased scale, and we said, listen, do I need coal? Fine. This fossil fuel? Fine. But I got to achieve scale because that's what's going to create wealth and opportunity. And we end up with the ecological crisis that we're today living with. So tell me where you see these two schools of thoughts maybe landing, and is there a middle ground here?
I don't think it's mutually exclusive.
Okay.
And so I actually feel like if someone said, I'm only going to go focus on big, or I'm only going to focus on small, neither of those are right. And what I think will happen is, and it's already happening, so this is not even like superbly visionary, you're going to have an intelligent routing layer that organizations will build. And that'll be where one of the pieces of IP is that you'll actually protect. And what that'll do is say, when I have tasks to get done, where do I direct that query? Am I directing it to a large model because that task might be best answered by something that has a lot of context? Or am I going to direct it to
domain-specific.
something that's very domain specific? And that domain specific piece might give me a very specific answer, doesn't hallucinate, is actually going to have much closer guardrails. It's going to have a better cost to serve, all of those pieces. And so that and by the way, if you look at someone like Cursor, they've done this masterfully well. They have the Claude model, but now, a pretty large percentage of their queries go to their small models.
Yeah.
And so for anything that's a tab complete in coding, you would not need to go to a foundation model for that. That's a frontier model. You can go to a very, very optimized model for that. Yeah. And I think that's how most things will move forward. So this kind of binary view that we have, the architecture is going to shift to a much more meshed view than a binary view.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. Point. Let me also ask you about Cisco now, right? So, I mean, though I think we've touched upon it, how you're dealing with the change within your organization, with your clients, customers as well at the Cisco Summit. Talk to us about how and where you are seeing opportunities for Cisco, because Cisco is, again, an interesting company from my vantage point where, again, been around for a while, right? And most tech waves tend to disrupt a bunch of companies, so you've got to stay on top of the wave. As much as a new company, I think it's very important for a company that's been around for some time to make sure that they don't miss the wave. So how is Cisco now positioning itself maybe differently from a security standpoint, but even otherwise? And how do you see that future panning out now?
So firstly, I think about Cisco as a 40-year-old startup.
Oh, right? Good.
Okay. And
it's one of the few companies now that can say that.
We can actually now, I'd say 5 years ago, if I said it would not be intellectually honest. Right now, I feel like the amount of innovation we've had in the past 18 months alone dwarfed what we had done in the previous decade combined.
Oh, wow.
And I think the next 12 months will dwarf the past 18 months.
That's because of the changes that are happening in the AI world, or otherwise?
The tempo has changed. I think we've changed our culture. We've been very intentional about innovating, and doing it at speed and at scale. So the way to think about Cisco is we are the critical infrastructure company for the AI era. What does that mean? I always tell people, think about Cisco as the picks and shovels company for the gold rush. We are going to provide the infrastructure. And so what infrastructure are we providing? Well, we're providing high performance, low latency, energy efficient networking, switching that actually connects the GPUs. These GPUs that you have, if they don't get networked, you got nothing.
That's right.
Right? And so it's like oxygen. You have to network this thing. And so we build our own silicon, we build our own switching infrastructure and systems, and we build our own software and OS, we build our own platform for security, we have our own observability, and then we have our own data platform, and then we build our own applications. We've got that full stack. But what we want to do is make sure that we become the critical infrastructure for AI. So the first thing we do is provide the networking for not just intra-cluster communication within the data center, but also intra-data center communication, where you can have two data centers with thousands of GPUs, hundreds of thousands of GPUs. What we want to do is make sure that we become the critical infrastructure for AI. So the first thing we do is provide the networking for not just intra-cluster communication within the data center, but also intra-data center communication, where you can have two data centers with thousands of GPUs, hundreds of thousands of GPUs, hundreds of kilometers apart, that can act as one coherent cluster for a single training run. That's massive, right? That's something that required us to build special kind of chips that provided that data center, not just data center interconnected low latency, but provide the entirety of that system operating as one coherent ultra cluster. Okay. So that was the first thing we did, is
like the
provide
internet
the optics.
of GPUs. Okay.
Yeah, what was that?
It's like the internet of GPUs.
The internet of GPUs, yeah, exactly. And so we provided that, which is have the apparatus for connectivity, which includes optics, which includes network ASICs, which includes switching infrastructure, routing infrastructure, all of that pulled together, and compute that we'll work with partners and put together servers. So that's the first thing we do. Yeah. The second area is we provide trust, which means safety and security systems for not just using AI in cyber defense, because the adversary attacks are going to get more sophisticated, but we will also provide ways to secure AI itself. We have a product called AI Defense that's 100% written by AI that actually does this thing that we were talking about of validating a model and providing runtime enforcement guardrails. We do that. And then the third thing is you have to provide full level of observability throughout the entire stack. How is the GPU performing? How is the model performing? What are your tokenomics looking like? Are you able to generate the most efficient and the most secure tokens per dollar per watt? That's a pretty important kind of dynamic. And I personally feel like the competitive differentiation for every country and every company is going to be, can I have secure, efficient generation of tokens? That's going to be the new currency. And so what we want to do is provide observability throughout the entire stack for that.
Yeah.
If we do that, we become that core foundation.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what we've been doing. And now we're generating billions of dollars of revenue doing it. So it's not just, this was a fantasy that we'll get to at some point in time.
You have
every
revenues.
hyperscaler, every service provider, every neo cloud, every sovereign cloud now has a choice to go to Cisco to use this. And when they do, all of those learnings can also be translated to the enterprise because we actually have these same chips that we build for hyperscalers that can now be put into systems that can be optimized for the enterprise, which has an entirely different set of needs.
Yeah. Before we move into what we have towards the end, which is a rapid fire segment.
All right.
And consider this as a preview that I'm letting you know that it's coming.
Okay.
I have one last question, and then we'll move to the rapid fire segment to conclude. Jeetu, this has been a great conversation. We've discussed, of course, tech, geopolitics, all of that, but we've also discussed personal.
Probably the broadest range I think I might have discussed in the podcast.
No, good. I'm glad. I think important to go broad and deep. I think in our current world, I want to ask you about the impact of AI on society. You've been a keen observer, as I can gauge, of yourself, people, relationships, as we've discussed. And typically, I don't ask this question, but given we've discussed a bunch of these things today, tell me how you are seeing the impact of society playing out in terms of human relationships, societal structures. What's going to change? If there was a time, you've grown up in India, so we've gone from a joint family structure, for example, to nuclear families, and that has its own implication and all that. That just as an example, but what are maybe some trends you're seeing that you can point to which is related to the impact of AI on how our society functions?
I think right now firstly, the narrative has a lot of hope and optimism about what this can do, but also a lot of fear. And I think we have to kind of bring people along to make sure that they don't think about this as a fearful thing, but they think about this as something that could tremendously enhance lives. Because in my mind, the biggest societal contribution, we look at this, I think the narrative has been slightly, I wish the narrative were not constructed the way it was, which is it was overly emphasizing productivity, right? I wish the narrative was more around what are the quality of problems that we would have wanted to solve that we were just able to not solve thus far, that we now have an entirely different set of mechanisms to be able to solve to enhance human life.
Correct. It's the healthcare and education example I was giving
earlier. It's pure healthcare
education. You've not been able to solve that problem so far for 1 billion plus people.
Can I solve cancer? But not just cancer. I want to solve every disease.
Correct.
And and that's the ability that we have now to be able to do this. And that, in my mind, is the optimistic scenario that we have to keep in mind and say that's the true north we have to get to.
Yeah.
The pessimistic scenario of what happens if, a terminal state is reached, a terminator kind of state is reached where all of a sudden these robots have their own set of ambitions and their own set of kind of
their own social media networks,
their own vanities and all of that. And by the way, that piece of it, you have to make sure that we start working collaboratively with within the ecosystem so that there's guardrails that are put in place. Because I don't think that's a illegitimate fear. I think that's a real fear that we have to make sure that we can put some guardrails around.
Okay.
But what you're now in a race condition where everyone's moving at a really fast pace where you can't stop it.
Yeah.
So the only thing you can do is make sure that you actually create the trust frameworks in place in parallel.
Okay.
that actually are moving at the same pace and speed as the progress of AI is happening.
Yeah.
And the good news is, all of the people that are building these technologies, us included, are very, very focused on making sure that that gets to be front and center.
Yeah.
And the model companies, you talk to Dario, you talk to Demis, you talk to Sam, you talk to all of these folks. They feel like, yes, there's a constraint on infrastructure. We have to do massive data center build-outs. That's important because without the infrastructure, you don't have anything. But if you don't have trust, man, this thing could go sideways.
Okay.
And so they all are very, very intentional about it. And I feel like they're going to, as a community, we're going to make the right calls.
Yeah. One of the implications of social media networks has been the attention deficit disorder.
Yeah.
One of the implications, it seems, of AI models and AI agents seems to possibly be cognitive decline. That if the Industrial Revolution leads us to lose physical muscle, this might make us lose mental muscle.
Yeah.
Do you think that?
I don't. I actually think the opposite. Just from personal experience so far. By the way, I don't believe that could not happen. That is a very legitimate, concern that we should think about. But so far, what I've experienced in my own psychology, because I have found myself, it's harder for me to sit down and read a 300-page book today than it was.
Correct.
Because I think notifications was one of the worst inventions that humans ever made. It's a constant interrupt. And so I do feel like,
It's like even if you're home bell ringing all the time.
Oh my goodness. I find myself, at some point in time, I don't even know, but I just gravitate to my phone and start looking at it. Okay. And we've been rewired and reconditioned. That is not healthy. Where I think this could go wrong is if you get intellectually lazy and don't have deep thinking, right? But I feel like there's a possibility to go the other way, where you could actually find tremendous amount of intellectual rigor that comes out of this in ways that you would have not been able to think about. And I'm finding myself in that zone right now when I collaborate with AI, then thinking I'm intellectually lazy on this stuff.
Lazy.
I'm not just telling it to go do something for me and I'm just going to use it and regurgitate it. I'm using it to think deeper than I would have otherwise done.
Yeah. And hopefully that's not just you, but I think the broader mass of humanity. But let's now quickly move to rapid fire.
Yes.
So if you are talking to a student today, think of yourself in high school at GD Somani in Bombay, what would you advise them to do? How to think about AI and also what to study?
I'd say be extremely hungry and be curious and learn to learn. The skill is to learn to learn. What to study? I think any of the humanities would be super valuable right now. I think,
over tech? So if someone's making a choice between the two?
I would say the foundation of tech is super important, but if you can actually couple the foundation of tech with humanities, you'll have a superpower.
That's the holy grail.
Yeah.
Moving on to policymakers. For countries other than the US or China, policymaker that you're speaking with, is AI invention more important or AI adoption and diffusion?
I think you have to, you mean from a policy standpoint?
Yeah, for a policymaker, as they allocate resources and attention, should they focus on AI R&D, AI inventions, innovation, or should they be focused on AI adoption and diffusion?
I think I would go with adoption and diffusion is going to have more policy-based implications. But I don't think you should discourage innovation either. So I think they're both important, but I would slightly, 5149, I would go to the adoption and diffusion
Adoption
side.
and diffusion. One thing the US is getting wrong in its overall AI strategy or approach.
I don't know if it's the US, but I would say the media narrative in the US around largely thinking about this from a fear-first standpoint is something that I'd like to see.
That needs to change.
I think you have to look at it in a balanced way.
One thing that maybe China is getting wrong in its AI strategy and approach.
I think data privacy matters.
One thing Europe could do differently.
Be extremely, I think the diffusion dimension is a pretty important one. There's a huge amount of upside for AI adoption in a continent like Europe.
Yeah, very diplomatically put. One thing India could be doing differently.
I think continue this human-centric, like the Prime Minister laid out the Manav, kind of framework yesterday. I think that was extremely potent framework that we should actually see to the next level and build out the infrastructure and the ecosystem and work with the rest of the ecosystem. I think we're doing all the right things. We just need to continue to keep doing it.
On the personal front now, Jeetu, which AI application that you have seen out there excites you the most?
Look, I feel like right now I'm still pretty blown away with the reasoning model capability of the core frontier models. And then what's starting to happen with video and multimodal and design systems is pretty fascinating to me. So I would say product-wise, I think the 3 or 4 foundation models have done a fantastic job, and then Midjourney's done an amazing job. And there's so many of them that I don't want to kind of name someone and then feel like everyone else is left out.
It's like acknowledgements at a award ceremony.
It's like the Oscar
to make sure
awards,
you touch upon everyone.
Yeah.
The application of AI, especially from a security standpoint, given you're at Cisco, that keeps you up at night.
Oh, I think if we don't keep guardrails around rogue behavior of agents, that could be damaging, and we have to make sure that we create these trust systems and frameworks in place.
Great. And finally, we've done very well on the rapid fire. Books or Substacks. I've changed my question also in recent days. Books or Substacks that you recommend for people who are watching or listening?
If you're early in career, I still think reading and absorbing Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma and Innovator's Solution, those 2 books, just think of it as your Bible or Gita or whatever you think, Quran, and just that's the core book for the tech community, and I think those foundation principles still apply. And the other one is Ben Horowitz has written a great book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I love that book. I feel like I give it to, and then from a leadership perspective, Phil Jackson had written a book called Sacred Hoops.
Okay, that I haven't heard of.
Which where he teaches how Michael Jordan could be trained. And he's like, how do you train someone as legendary as Michael Jordan? As you teach him to pass the ball and trust someone else to make sure that they can make the shot. Because otherwise, even if Michael makes 70 points in the game, you still will lose the game if no one else makes it. So like teaching Michael to trust the team to pass the ball was something that required the entire team to raise their game so that he felt like, if I give it to you, you're not going to let me down.
Yeah.
And that I think psychologically is a pretty important thing for leadership.
Yeah. And our last one, podcast guests that you recommend. And given the expanse of the kind of work you've done and how you travel, give us at least a 2 or 3. Yeah.
I mean, I can give you like 11 or 12.
Go ahead.
Just go to every single person that came to the Cisco AI Summit and ask them to come attend your podcast. I think you'd have a very, very enriched viewership.
Other than those, because those are obviously some of the bigger names, right? And the conventional names, let's say, of who people would already be knowing and expecting, but maybe some unconventional names of guests that you could recommend.
There's this gentleman, Igor, that used to work for Elon Musk at X.AI. And he's now starting a new company.
That's right.
Man, he is one deep thinker.
I think we've taken up a lot of your time, but I think we've covered the personal, the global, the Cisco specific, but really most importantly, I think thank you for sharing, I think your journey, your leadership lessons, what's driven you, what's kept you grounded, and the values that have kept you grounded. I think as we run through more and more technology in our lives, I can't emphasize, I think personally, how important that piece is and how quickly that sometimes gets lost. So thank you for
I just hope, like maybe to close, I would just say to your audience, especially the younger people that are coming into the workforce, this could be one of the most amazing times to be alive in tech.
Yeah.
And so don't lose your optimism as you get in, and make sure that you don't lose your hunger and curiosity. This is a fun time to be alive.
Yeah, no, I think you've exemplified the optimism very well for people who are listening. I think important to keep the optimism up, but then prepare for
Prepare for the
whatever else
downside.
might come. Correct. No, thank you so much, Jeetu.
Thank you
It's
again
been
for
a
having me.
pleasure.
Cheers.